I want to take a moment to thank all servicemen and women who have served our country, who are serving our country, and who will be serving our country. Happy 4th of July.
Good morning, Vietnam!
But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.
To infinity and beyond!
Some people without brains do an awful lot of talking, don't they?
It's classified.
You talking to me?
I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.
I can't fly!
Expecto Patronum!
Entertainment X.
You never know what you're gonna get.
Last December, I had the unique privilege of visiting an Air Force base in the United States of America, and I sat down with Lieutenant Colonel Taylor Herron to discuss leadership and other principles he lives by. I wasn't quite sure when to release this episode, and I find that the 4th of July is the perfect day to share such a wonderful conversation on leadership. Leadership, good leadership, is crucial to a thriving society. It has become a great interest of mine, and Lieutenant Colonel Herron was kind enough to share his views. So I hope you enjoy, and keep on keeping on.
Hello, hello. We are back here with another episode of Entertainment X. Today with me is Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Taylor Herron. Taylor, thank you for talking to me today.
It's an absolute pleasure.
All right, we're going to get right to it here. We got a limited amount of time, so we're going to jump right to the questions. What is the biggest lesson your father taught you about leadership? Or one of many?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing he probably taught me was that at the end of the day, people are emotive before they're rational. And what I mean by that is, you can design whatever kind of program you want based on some, perfect calculus of what makes rational sense, but people are ultimately emotive beings. And so it's important to be able to kind of figure out what influences them and kind of figure out how to get after kind of their motivations before you worry about kind of the rational side of things. Okay. So he's a massive people person, smiles all the time, right? Really engages folks. And I think that the ability to do that probably sets him apart and allows him to get a lot of things done.
Okay, so daily rituals. Do you have any? Do you have any daily morning rituals?
Yeah, so for me, what I do is every morning get up at 4 o'clock. I do it because I find that I'm more productive if I'm not distracted. And so for me, the ability to get up before everyone else is kind of engaged and doing things is useful. I deliberately stack up the things in my day early that I know is important, but maybe not emergent or critical or something that's going to, kind of take me to here's something I must do today, but things that kind of have longer term impact. So it's silly, but literally the first thing I do is I will go and look at whose birthday it is in my unit, and I'll send an email out to whoever's birthday it is that day, and just go through and send them a personal message. It doesn't take long, but right, so I do that right away, and then I try and basically at that point just tackle things that I need dedicated, non-distracted kind of time to work through. Probably more important is at the tail of the day planning the next day forward, right? So what I found was that, particularly in kind of today's internet age and all that, is that it's so easy to be distracted by email routinely, like every single minute, right? And so what I do is I will deliberately not check my email throughout the day, with the exception of a couple of filters I set for certain people. So if my boss wants to interrupt me, that's his prerogative. They can do it. Shy of him and a handful of people I've kind of designated that authority, if you will. I deliberately don't check my email to the end of the day. And it allows me to, at the end of the day, work through my email and then basically plan out my next day. And so when I walk in to the new day going, I basically have already here's the things I must tackle and here's the things I must get done. And I basically start working through, and it allows me to control my schedule more than allowing me to be driven by random distractions of an email here or a phone call there.
And in regards to sending out the birthday emails, I noticed the morale, even among, is very high. And do you think that there's leadership is an innate ability, or do you think that's a learned thing? Like, were you a poor leader when you started and kind of grew on it, or a mixed bag?
I think it's both. I think some people, their EQ is just so low that they're probably going to struggle. What I do with my, I did this with all my officers, I think last month. We literally took, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I made everyone read the book. Went through all the principles. I made them deliberately try and practice a couple of them throughout the month.
What book was this?
How to Win Friends and Influence People.
That's a great book.
It is. Written in 1936, I think. So it stood the test of time, right? In the military profession, the reality is, it's not all about influence all the time. There's some things in that book that don't always apply. But from a kind of back to the people who are motive before the rational side of this, for me, it was important to recognize that when you took certain approaches, you certainly have the risk of, of alienating folks, or there's things you can do that can clearly motivate them more. And so kind of being aware of that is pretty important to me. So the ability to, before I make a decision, not just think, is it the right decision, but think about, how is it going to be executed? How is it going to be accepted by folks or not? How is it going to be embraced? And for me, leveraging a book like that allowed me to at least be aware of where the, potential faults are, and then mitigate them if I needed to, or accept the risk.
What's the most common incorrect piece of advice that you hear given in leadership?
I mean, I guess the only thing I would say is that I think a lot of times people, I think it depends on your level of leadership, but I think the biggest struggle people have is as they move up from maybe a tactical leadership level to something a little bit more senior, is the tendency to continue to try and be the person solving the problem themselves. So you can get really high-performing folks, and they do well because they're great at tearing apart tasks and personally accomplishing it, right? But as you move up, I think it becomes critically important to understand how to obviously delegate, but then, frankly, sometimes let people, get out of the owning the process, right? So I'll kind of flip the question on its head, but I guess the better advice for me is to focus on the end state. So, Covey rule number 2, right? Start with the end in mind. But the ability, and I think it's very hard, to avoid the temptation to go solve the problem for someone, and instead focus on what the result is, and give people, the problem to solve, give them the, here's the objective I want you to meet, and then let them get creative and own the process to get there, right?
Kind of tell them what to do and then take the hands off.
Leave them alone,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any documentaries that you enjoy watching, or books that you enjoy reading? Yeah, I mean, obviously Covey, we talked through that one, and then the How to Win Friends and Influence People piece. Yeah. Eric D. Beinhocker, The Origin of Wealth, for me was a pretty good one. So I'm kind of an economics geek, but more importantly, it talked about, for me, the ability to take calculated risk, to kind of to put seed money on the right kind of places. And I kind of thought of that in my life, like how many times do you just do the safe thing, and how much do you reserve a little bit of your time and passion to go chase something that's a little bit out there, that may be a high risk but high reward if you get it. Yeah. Do you have any advice that you would give to your 20-year-old self?
Really, the whole no regrets speech, right? I mean, I've never taken a job that I thought I could do.
Okay.
That I was comfortable with, if that makes sense. And I've always found at the end of that job, I always felt pretty confident. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You realize that a lot of limits that you put, that most of the limits are limits you put on yourself. So the only, I guess, advice I give myself is risk more.
What's your workout regimen? What do you do in the gym?
Yeah. So for me, I like to have something to kind of, look forward to. So I'm a marathon guy, right? So for me, I basically plan for those, and then I train towards them. I tend to do a whole lot of treadmill stuff just because, just in the environment I'm in, it seems to work well right now. But it allows me to sit there and catch up on the news and things like that at the same time. In the past, I've done the whole podcast kind of thing or whatnot as I'm running. But for me, running is really that release,
After we finished recording, the Lieutenant Colonel and I got to chat a little bit more about leadership. He created a competition where members of the unit would record holiday songs, them singing with their family, their kids, found objects in the house, and it was very entertaining. And they got to share it as a group on social media with each other. And it really boosted the morale of the group. It was entertaining, and it brought the team together in a way that was completely separate from the Air Force. He talks about kind of breaking the rules of leadership in a traditional sense. He does not keep himself separate from the group. His door is always open, and he always finds himself communicating with the group. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know it's a little different from what I usually do, but nonetheless, I think it's important to hear what's going on in other aspects and for us to stay completely open-minded in our individual paths and pursuits, that we realize there is and are trees, nature, and growth on either sides of the path. And it's not just your path, it's everything you're passing by as you head on your way in your life. So thank you for listening, and happy 4th of July.
You've been listening to Entertainment X, the podcast. You can follow Entertainment X on Instagram at _EntertainmentX_. If you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join Clay next week for another curiosity conversation on Entertainment X. Thank you for listening.